I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion, and I'll tell you what is a perpetual bucket list item for me. I am incredibly jealous of everybody who gets to see Paul McCartney live in concert. He played 2 nights this week in Montreal. He's playing a show in Hamilton, Ontario on Friday. Also on Friday, by the way, we get the 4th installment of the Beatles Anthology series. But for today, we are not talking about the Beatles. No, I would like to take a moment for Paul's other band.
The first one said to the second one there, I hope you're having fun. Band on the run. Band on the run.
Come on, from 1973, that is Band on the Run, Paul McCartney and Wings, who are being celebrated with a brand new box set and book. And also my pal Paul Myers is so excited to talk about this. He's here to talk about why Wings are having a moment, particularly among younger listeners. Paul, good to see you, buddy.
Hey, good to see you too, Elamin.
I'm delighted that you're here. Listen, as I mentioned, we're sort of, there is a season for Beatles nostalgia industry, and that's sort of like roughly right now. But that's not the thing we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this new Wings box set that Paul himself helped put together. What's the motivation, you think, for Paul to go, you know what? A moment for Wings, please.
Well, something that Paul McCartney does very well is legacy building and legacy adjusting. He's very elastic in his sense of history. I'm not saying he's making stuff up, but sometimes
Elastic in his sense of history is a wonderful way to put it.
Yeah. It's just that sometimes he will reframe his own legacy, and luckily for him, he's alive and well and functioning. He can do that. Very few historical characters can constantly stick around to say, hey, here's what I want you to say. And the thing is, there are lots of scholars writing about him at this point, and I've just in the last little while read several of them. And for me, it's a hobby trying to deconstruct McCartney's role in the Beatles, and then Wings. Then the fact that he created Wings out of whole cloth, it did not sound like the Beatles. Essentially, like it really made an effort in the early '70s to stake out a new Paul McCartney band.
Well, let's spend a bit of time doing that, because I want to get to the Wings and the relevance right now, but I think it's maybe worth talking about how it all began. So Paul forms Wings with his wife Linda. They become incredibly successful. They sell millions of records, and yet they sort of still get a bit of a rough ride with critics in the '70s. They remain the butt of jokes for a fair bit of time after. Actually, I want you to just take a listen to this.
I've got a broad taste, from the Britpop bands like UB40, Def Leppard, right back to classic rock like Wings.
Who's Wings?
They're only the band the Beatles could have been.
So that's Steve Coogan. That is from his sitcom I'm Alan Partridge, and so he's talking about his love of Wings because it's a bit of a recurring bit there. What do you think made Wings such an easy target?
Well, the fact that they weren't the Beatles, for one thing.
Yeah.
When McCartney first came out with doing solo records and being Wings, there was like, oh, come on, you're not really going to try this again. There's no way lightning can strike twice. And he just kept going. He kept making records that were critically panned, but the public was buying them. Yeah. So there was this weird. Is that a dichotomy? I have to look it up. But
that's a dichotomy.
Contradiction, anyway. The contradiction is that the critics couldn't kill him. The critics couldn't stop Wings from being a huge band on a major label, even though they really wanted to. So there was constantly snickering every time they had a top 10 record. There was like, how dare he? You know what I mean?
He's still here, and they're not the Beatles.
We said he was bad. Why do people like him still?
What do you think Linda added to the band that made them a unique thing that was entirely so separate from anything that the Beatles tried to construct?
Well, to answer that, I also do have to address the sexism of the times, because, the fact that Paul had asked his untrained, let's be honest, everyone knew she wasn't professional as a musician. She was a great photographer and definitely very, an equal part of their family household. Like, she helped him in so many ways. Maybe I'm Amazed would not have been written without her being that person for Paul. Yeah. And that is one of the greatest testaments to any person that supported another person. Yeah. But so when she started being on stage, there was definitely a lot of pushback that, he's always got the wife up there with him, who's that, and at the same time, she actually did bring something to it. If you listen to those records closely, like, not to pull the I'm a musician and I listen to things thing, but her voice her voice blends with Paul in a way that John and Paul, or George, John, and Paul never did.
Yeah.
And there was something about her American voice too that added a little bit of an international flavor it wasn't so much a Liverpool sound anymore. And I think that there was an element of the two of them together that created a nucleus that all these other, rotating cast of Wings members, except Denny Lane, who stayed pretty much throughout all of it. I think their sound was also a little more arena rock friendly than the Beatles had been. Like, they were adjusting to the 70s, And so there's songs like Band on the Run and Jet that were not Beatles songs at all. In fact, they had more in common with like boogie rock of the 70s,
So what I want to play right now is just like I want to talk about the ways that the music of Wings has kind of had a lot of reverberations through time, and I want you to just have a listen to how McCartney's music is being reshaped by musicians from other generations, but also other genres. Have a listen to this.
Ooh, baby, you couldn't have done a worse thing to me.
So we hear there Paul McCartney from 1979, Era Through Me, and then after that, Erykah Badu's song, Gone Baby Don't Be Long, who sampled that song. Era Through Me has had this like really long life. Was not a big hit, right? But then Harry Styles is like, that's one of my favorite songs of all time. What do you think it is about Wings and this particular moment in Paul McCartney music that makes it so ripe for kind of a reappraisal and going, you know what? They made something really special there, and we should spend some more time thinking about it.
Well, there's two things here, of course. One is that the Beatles were rammed down everyone's throat. So people from every generation after them, and I feel sorry because I was a Beatles fan from the get-go. I'm old enough to say that. And I mean, definitely, put it this way, I'm not to overage myself.
Yeah.
I was aware and awake by the time the Beatles were well established.
Right.
And then the next couple of generations, 3 generations, had to be told the Beatles are great. And then they eventually discovered that they are great, but they were never told that about Wings. So my point being here is Wings was Paul McCartney's indie project, even though it was on a major label, but it was his handmade, sometimes very, I wouldn't say amateur, but naive art. Like, he sometimes didn't know exactly how to play a certain part, but he would just hammer it out and then
figure it out. Yeah.
And it was all overdubbed a lot of the time. And a song like Arrow Through Me, I've seen his music people on YouTube go, oh my God, this song, the chords go everywhere. It's amazing. And like Steely Dan heads are like freaking out about, that's a minor ninth.
How do they do it?
Yeah, how does he do that? And I think he's an intuitive musician. And I think that's what puts him in the league with the indie people, is like there's a lot of self-taught indie people who go intuitively towards something more, that if they'd been more trained, they might have stopped themselves before they got there. So Arrow Through Me is nuts, but the groove is great. And McCartney's bass, he was starting to play with a Rickenbacker bass in the 70s, not the old Hofner. And it really does make a difference on those records. So when you're sampling a bass line that's played with a pick and it's got a certain like kick to it.
Yeah.
Of course, Erykah Badu's people are going to get to that. It's a great little backbeat.
It's a perfect little fit, 100%. I just want to, before we go, I just want to play another Wings song that's having a bit of a resurgence lately.
And when I go away, I know my heart can stay with my love. It's understood.
That's Mariah Carey. That's from her most recent album, Here For It All, and that's a cover of the Wings song, My Love. Look, Paul, there's something it goes without saying that Paul McCartney has deeply reshaped the world of rock and deeply reshaped the world of classic rock. But his engagement with the world of pop and R&B has kind of been pretty consistent, right? We've got Stevie Wonder, we've got Michael Jackson, you've got Rihanna and Kanye West. Why do you think his work with Wings has sort of made such a natural fit for him to sort of be interacting with the worlds of pop and R&B?
Well, to put it in the Harry Potter context, he's the boy who lived. Like, he's the one who stays. He's the one who stays contemporary, stays relevant. He's touring, he's playing stadiums and huge arenas, even in Canada this week.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who it's a two-way street, right? He endorses the young generation and looks hip. Then the young generation endorses him, or they meet up with him, and then all of a sudden they have the credibility that they're, hey grandfather, I guess who likes my music, Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And it's like a credibility thing both ways. So he's been engaging with people where, obviously George, passed away, John's passed away, and Ringo likes to stay in this lane, which is really awesome. He makes the occasional country record, but he mostly plays greatest hits tours.
Yeah.
And he's great at it. And all respect to Ringo, who I deeply love. But Paul does this thing where he's constantly out there saying, I'm going to engage with everybody. And that is why I think generations have still dug him. And I think he's having his moment. And I think it's great.
I am incredibly jealous of all the people who get to see him this week. But Paul, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for being here today.
Always a pleasure, man.
Delight to see you. Paul Myers is a writer and the host of the Record Store Day podcast. He's also the author of the new book, John Candy, A Life in Comedy. He was in San Francisco. You can listen to the new self-titled Wings box set wherever you get your music. Also, that new book out is called Wings, the Story of a Band on the Run. And if you're in Hamilton, I'm going to be really jealous of you, but you can watch Paul McCartney at the grand opening of the TD Coliseum this Friday. My name is Elamin. This show is called Commotion. We'll see you tomorrow.